You're listening to KMRE 102.3 FM in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. Your community, your voice, your station. I'm Matt Benoit, and this is Are You Serious? It's the comedy program and podcast where local comedians get real about some of the darker material they have on the stage and their life off the stage. Now we are here with an expat of both America and the and the Bellingham comedy scene, Claire Jones. How are you doing, Claire?
I'm great. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing all right. Just hoping the Seahawks are going to win.
Yeah, thanks for coming to meet me instead of watching the Seahawks game.
Yes,
I appreciate that.
That's okay. It's good. I needed desperately to get another episode in the can, so we're all...
Everybody wins.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the wonderful Claire Jones!
I grew up in the Sammamish area, went to Western, and then stuck around for a little while, as most people who come to Western do.
What made you decide on Western?
I'd always wanted to be a teacher, and Western is like the teacher school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the campus, and I was like, this is beautiful. I have to go here. So that was always my number one choice, and when I got in, I was over the moon. Anybody ever just sit in the dressing room and cry? Just me? Okay, super. So I was trying to shop for pants the other day, and I hate shopping for jeans because I have thighs of thunder. But anyway, I was shopping for jeans and it just wasn't working. So I just kind of sat down on the floor and felt really bad about myself. And then Happy by Pharrell came on. I was like, there is no God.
You go to any private schools, or was it all public school through high school?
Yeah, all public school through high school.
What high school did you graduate from?
I graduated from Eastlake High School in Sammamish in 2009.
Okay.
So coming up on that 10-year reunion, which is pretty weird.
Yeah, I've got my 10-year reunion next year, which is, I don't even know if I'm going to go do it or where it's going to be or what we're going to do. I don't know.
I was class president, so I think I'm supposed to organize it. I don't really know how that works.
Great.
So I'm just going to not think about it for another
Yeah.
year and a half.
Yeah, because if anyone didn't hate you in high school, they will after you fail to organize the
Yeah,
reunion.
exactly. So
I was talking to my friend about this the other day because I was pretty pissed about getting a dick pic. And she's like, well, do you keep them? And I was like, yeah. They're in a folder on my computer called junk drawer, actually. Actually, that's not true. I don't keep dick pics. I need the space on my computer for bigger files.
I've always loved to laugh, and I think growing up I always enjoyed being the center of attention. So I don't know, I think I always, not so much anymore, but I always, I think as a kid, enjoyed the spotlight. I did drama and choir and tried to be a dancer, and that didn't really work out, but 2 out of 3 probably okay.
When did you first, you at some point obviously got interested in stand-up. When did you want to try stand-up for the first time, and when did you actually do that?
Oh boy, this is a story. So I think it was probably my junior or senior year of college. I realized that I complained a lot, and that I would do a lot of that on Facebook and to my friends. And I was like, all right, you need to stop complaining. Your life doesn't actually suck. You just are making it seem like it sucks. And so I was trying to turn that complaining a little bit more positive. And so I would try and complain and post things on Facebook, but make them funny, if that makes sense, and kind of relatable. And I started doing that, and people after a while were like, you should really do stand-up comedy. And I was like, I don't know how to do stand-up comedy. I just think of funny things and then post them on Facebook. That's not stand-up comedy. And so people were telling me that for a while, and this is so dumb. My boyfriend in college, my senior year, and I had kind of been talking about we watched a lot of stand-up on Netflix. I think that was really when I started to get into it a little more. And he'd been talking about how he wanted to try stand-up, and then around the time we broke up, I was really struggling, and in a fit of we broke up on good terms. We were both this isn't going anywhere. We have different goals, so it was fine. But I was really struggling. It was at the end of the quarter. My grandpa had just died, so I was having a hard time. And I was like, you know what? I'm really funny. I'm gonna do this. I need to do it before him. So I just decided that I was gonna do open mic at the Underground Coffee House up at Western. And I told a bunch of friends to hold myself accountable. I was like, I'm doing open mic night, so come. That way I can't back out and like be a chicken. And I wrote, I still have it somewhere. I wrote my first set on a dining hall napkin because I was so afraid that I was going to forget it, but like I didn't have any paper for some reason.
Yeah.
Great student, obviously. I just wrote it on a napkin because that's what I had. And I went up there and I did it, and it went okay. Like people laughed when I wanted them to. So
After that first time, did you immediately feel that you wanted to keep doing this? Was that sort of or were you not sure?
I think I knew as soon as I got off stage. I was like, I'm gonna do this again. And then the next week was dead week, so they didn't, or finals week or something, so they didn't have like an open mic that next week. And I was like devastated. I was like, why did I wait so long to try this? And so I had to wait until the next quarter, I think after spring break or something. But yeah, I got up there a few more times.
Now, you mentioned, did your boyfriend end up doing comedy as well?
One time.
Oh, only once. Okay.
One
I wasn't
time.
sure if he went on to also do comedy. So.
No, I think he did an open mic night once, and
Okay.
that was it.
Huh, too bad for him.
Yeah. I mean, it worked out for me, so.
Yeah. So how long ago was that?
That was 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been doing it about, not quite 5 years, but about 4. What's the weirdest place you've ever performed?
Let's see. There's one time I did a show in a bar. It was a great bar, but they didn't really have a good setup. And so what they did was they took a door off of like the storage room, and then they put it in the front, and then like put a tapestry over it, and that was our stage. And then I did a show one time in a bar that had like 6 disco balls in it. It was not a big bar. It was called Lucy in the Sky, and it was just kind of sticky everywhere. And there was like this big orange couch that took up most of the stage.
Wow.
And I don't know, it was kind of one of those places where you're like, if I touch the door handle, like I'm probably gonna leave with hepatitis.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Floors are sticky and you don't
Yeah, you're just kind of like not sure why it's
Yeah.
sticky, but it is.
Yeah. And you don't really want to know why. That's
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, not a lot of questions you want to know the answers to.
Okay. Where was that?
That was in Madrid, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and we will get into that just really soon here. So what well, I guess first off, how would your style of stand-up, how would you describe your style of humor? This is always a difficult question for people to answer.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, I don't know what my brand is yet. I'm still, I've been doing this for, like you said, almost 5 years now, and like I still have no idea. Like, I don't know. I feel like I play an exaggerated version of myself on stage, if that makes sense.
And just a lot of complaints, right? A lot of complaining.
Complaints, yeah, and just awkwardness, like, and just, exaggerating things that I'm maybe not so good at, or awkward situations that I get myself into, because that happens a lot. I don't know. I was trying to describe it to my friend the other day. I think I'm one of those people that, like, I don't know. I'm like the that could only happen to you friend,
Yeah.
I think. So I don't mean for these things to happen. They just do. And you just kind of, go along with it. And you're like, well, this will be a good story when it's done. But I got to get through it first, I guess.
Anybody out there visually impaired? And I don't just mean like don't know how to dress yourself. I mean like can't see for shit. I am. But the great thing about that is when my glasses come off, every penis I see is the biggest penis I've ever seen.
You graduated from Western with a teaching degree in 2000 when?
I graduated from Western with a degree in anthropology.
Anthropology, that
actually.
was- okay.
Yeah, a little less useful. Yeah, and a degree in anthropology in 2013.
Okay. And what happened after that? What did you
Let's see. After that, I took it. I didn't want to leave Bellingham, but like I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, so I took a job with AmeriCorps.
And you went to Missouri, that's right.
After that, yeah. So
Yeah.
first I worked in Bellingham for a year, and I started getting more involved in like the downtown Bellingham comedy scene, which was weird because I felt like there was this huge divide between like the people who did comedy downtown and like the people who did comedy up at Western. And like I don't think it's as much now. I mean, I'm obviously not around, so I can't say that, but I feel like I see people like on the set lists from Western doing shows here a little bit more often, which is awesome. I'm glad to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, there still is somewhat of a divide where people who would do the coffee house just will never wander down. Well, and part of it, too, though, is that they're not allowed in a bar.
Yeah, the age
or they
things.
don't know they can come to the Green Frog at 9:30 and still be underage.
Yeah.
Because it's underage until 10.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we get the people who are 21 or over that start coming regularly now, and that's good. So.
That's great. Yeah. I remember I was so scared the first time I did comedy at the Green Frog. I was like, oh my God, these people probably know what they're doing. They're probably so funny. And that was like I think around the beginning of the Green of Guffalingham. And there were enough of us to like do a show, and each of us got like 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And when you don't know what you're doing or how to write or who you are on stage or how to get off stage when the audience isn't laughing, like 10 minutes is a long time. And so just like looking back on it, I was just like, what were we doing? I mean, I think a lot of the people who go to the Green Frog regularly now could do 10 minutes and it would be no problem.
Definitely, yeah.
Just at the beginning, like, and looking back on some of my old stuff, and I think that was before I started recording myself, but just remembering like it was excruciating sometimes, and like I felt that like, okay, I'm given these 10 minutes, I need to use them, and that's just not always a good mindset to be in. Like you're holding the audience hostage, and they probably don't appreciate that. Like
yeah, if you feel like you're not sure what they're doing, they're probably not going to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, sometimes that they can enjoy that, but it depends what you're doing and what kind of audience it is. So
yeah, definitely true. There's a lot of factors, but I look back, like especially at the beginning of that time period where I like transitioned out of the very like friendly, forgiving underground coffee house audience to more of the like downtown crowd and like the people who would come to see their friends. And especially at the beginning, like I probably for about the first maybe longer than that, but like for the first 12 months of doing comedy, like I just felt so out of place here because everyone was a good like 5, 10, 15 years older than me. A lot of them knew each other. They were friends like outside of the open mic scene. They were all pretty into comic books, and like I just had, they're all dudes, and like I had nothing in common with them. And I was like, I don't know how to write jokes that are relevant, to me and my experience as this like 22-year-old like college grad with no practical life experience, and like they're all people who have been out of college for a while and like worked and had careers. And it was really hard at first because like, and I was really the only woman I think for a while. And then I think we finally started to get a few more women in the scene, and it was so refreshing because I didn't, it's like you don't really have anyone to like mentor you really. I mean, Randall like has, I don't know, he's my comedy bro. We decided on that like one time, but Randall really helped me out a lot just with, kind of encouraging me and being like, just, I don't know, having me keep going.
I'm single right now, and all my friends are like, Claire, why are you single right now? And I'm like, I don't know. But actually I do know, and just between you and the rest of you and me, I, one, am really bad at flirting, but two, I'm even worse at thinking ahead. I was on this intercambio the other day, and this guy and I are talking, and he goes, wow, you have great pronunciation. And without thinking ahead, I was like, oh, that's the second best thing I can do with my mouth. Look at me, you guys. I meant eat. Eat is the first best thing I can do with my mouth.
NBC a few years ago had a sort of national talent search. They did a thing up in Vancouver, British Columbia. You, Brett Emerson, I think a couple other people went up there, and you somehow made it to the semifinals of this national thing?
Yeah, that was a weird thing that happened. I went up with Anthony Johnson, Brett Emerson, and Michael Bednar, and like the four of us went up. It was like a Friday after work or something like that, and we went up to Vancouver, and we were just like prepared for this really long line, and then there was nobody. And the audition was at this comedy club, which is in like the basement of a hotel. And so we were like, oh, well, we'll just like hang out in the lobby. And the guy in the hotel was like, well, unless you have a room, like you can't be here until tomorrow. So we went across the street and we slept on the lawn of this church. And like, I was just there because I was
What time of year was it?
It was early July, I think.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, it was cold, but like, I don't know. I just went up because I was like, I just want to tell this story. Like, I want to say that, like, one time I camped out for a comedy audition.
Yeah.
Like, the other three guys were, like, super excited and super into it. And I was like, I'm just here for the ride. Like, honestly, I remember I was the only one who had the forethought to, like, bring a blanket. So, like, I had a blanket. I'm just hanging out, like, on my blanket. We're just, like, on this lawn of a church. I think it was Anthony had like a bunch of stand-up on his laptop, so we're just like watching stand-up on somebody's laptop, like on the lawn of this church. So then we get up the next day and we're like, all right, like we didn't really sleep, we didn't really eat, but like let's go do this. And so we lined up, and see, I'm trying to remember, this was in 2014, but it feels so long ago. And so they had us line up, I think, in groups of 10. And the first audition that we got, we were going to go like one after another in the, these like groups of 10. And the first audition was 60 seconds. We had like 1 minute to tell jokes. And
what was the panel of like judges? Like, what was, these
I
people in a room just watching you and then saying either like cool or
they didn't say anything.
Oh,
They
really?
just, so like, it was, I think that was the first time I'd ever been in a comedy club, actually. So yeah, it was just like this, all the lights were like turned on for the stage. It was like this big stage.
So the audition was at a comedy club, but it was pretty much empty except for...
Yeah, it was empty except for like the different rows of the comedians and like our groups of 10 or whatever. And then like there's this panel of judges at a table. Like it was kind of like American Idol sort of thing. Like I don't really watch TV, so I don't know, but like that's the only thing I can think of in my head is like there's this panel of judges, probably a bunch of famous people, NBC execs. I don't know. Like I had never heard of any of these people. I was like, I'm just along for the ride. And so we all did our auditions, and then afterward they posted a list of people who had made it. And I was on the list, but none of the other Bellingham guys were. And I was like, oh, I feel so bad because they got to wait around for me this whole afternoon. Like, and I was just like freaking out about this. And Brett was so helpful. He was like, you know what? Like, you did it. This is great. Just like, go and do 2 minutes. And I went back. I did the like 2-minute audition, which was actually way harder than the 1-minute audition. Which I didn't think it was going to be that way, but like in 1 minute, it's like you can tell like a joke or two. It's very clean, it's easy, you know, and then you're done. But 2 minutes, I was like, that's, twice as much time. But it's weird because like you can't really get into like a long joke. But a lot of the jokes that I was trying to think of, like, okay, these are some of my best jokes. Like, I don't know how to make them like, kind of compress them into 2 minutes. So that was for me like harder than coming up with the 1 minute material. And then, I don't remember how many people, I think there were like 20 or 25 or something people. And in this round too, so like for the 2-minute round, it was like all of the people who had moved on to the second round of this audition. And then they had like some people from comedy clubs like around the area and like from Canada, and people who'd come from like Just for Laughs, or like people who had like had sort of established themselves in the Vancouver or the Canadian scene. And so that was like really overwhelming too. I was like, whoa, we've got all these like people who probably get paid to do comedy, like maybe full time, people who have like been around, they've toured, they've gone to like, Just for Laughs, or they've done festivals. And I was like, I don't even think I knew what a comedy festival was. Like, again, like I said, I was just there for the ride. And they were like, okay, we'll post on our website when we're finished, like who, moves on, or you can call this number and we'll have like the list of names of people who have moved on. So I was like, all right, cool, whatever, so we like get back in the car and we're heading back towards Bellingham. And one of my friends, Silas Lindenstein, sent me a message on Facebook, and he was like, Claire, you made it. I was like, what? And then he was like, you made it. And so I like called the phone number, and they like listed off like 10 names or something like that. And it was like my name was on there, and I was just incredulous. I was like, I came all the way up here like just to say that like I camped out to audition for a comedy show, and now I'm like on this weird like semifinal showcase thing for NBC. And so I had to go back up there, and I don't think I've ever felt so far out of my league in my life than I
all
did.
The other
like
people around you, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone was, like not super, super nice, but everyone was professional. They were friendly-ish, like for a comedy audition. But, there were people from like LA and people who had been on TV and people who had, been in comedy festivals and done this. And it was just like me and one other woman out of these like 10 or 12 people. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing here? I've been doing open mics for like, I think maybe a year at that point. Mm-hmm. And, then I was just like in this room with all of these people. And like, I really let it get to my head. I got super nervous.
Now, was this a showcase in front of an actual audience?
Yeah. So this time the comedy club was full. It was still in like the hotel basement comedy club, but it was full. I do remember just like feeling so nervous. And like I wish I could remember his name, but I talked to this guy from LA, and he was so nice and patient. He was like, if you're here, like you're here for a reason. They obviously saw something in you. And I was just like, but all of these people, and he was like, you need to stop thinking about that. And like, you are here. This is, your moment, you shine. And I choked. I couldn't handle it. But, and I obviously didn't move on, but like, it was so surreal and so amazing that like I'd gone just to say that I did it, and then all of a sudden I was like in this weird national semifinals.
Did that do anything to change the way you looked at yourself as being like, well, maybe I'm good at this, or did it? I
don't really think it did in the moment. Like it really took a lot of reflection and like a lot of time, because like I remember I got off stage and I was like, you can do so much better, and I was just like so frustrated by my performance that I didn't really think, like, look at where you are right now. You've been doing open mics for like a year. So I don't know. I think it probably took a while. I don't know about you, but like I have a hard time like reflecting on myself and my abilities, and like especially with comedy, I'm like, okay, like maybe that wasn't so good, or like maybe I should go back to trying this or give this another shot. So I don't know. It was interesting. Like every now and then I watch that video and I was like, wow, like you have come so far from that. Like I don't know. It's interesting.
I got a tattoo this summer. Yeah, I know. I'm glad that was my first applause break. Super. I got a tattoo this summer. I really wanted to get a tattoo that said shit happens, but I was living with my parents and my mom said no. So I did not get that tattoo. But if I did get that tattoo, I think I would get it as like, a tramp stamp. So then when you take me home tonight, we could both regret that decision.
So you moved. So you were in Missouri for about a year.
Yeah, it was about a year.
And then after that, you moved back here to like the Northwest just briefly, or?
I was here for like a couple of weeks, and then I was like, I'm not done moving yet. I'm gonna go to Spain, because Missouri wasn't far enough away or different enough than Bellingham. So then I moved to Spain.
So yeah, I mean, what I was gonna say, just why did you move to Spain? What was the main? There was a teaching program, right?
Yeah, there was a teaching program. And that was like I have a job, I have income, like I can do this. I'll be able to support myself over there. But it just, I don't know, like I remember in third grade, I think it was 8, we did a unit on Australia, and somebody's aunt or whoever was a flight attendant. And so one day we came to class, and like they'd set the classroom up kind of like an airplane, and there were like a few people who worked for the airline there, and they like came in and they kind of treated the first half of the day like we were on this, like we were going to the airport and we were on this plane and we were flying to Australia. And I just remember thinking like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I went home that day, I was like, Mom, I'm going to live in another country someday. And she's probably like, okay, you know, whatever, good for you. And like, I just was so fascinated by other cultures and the idea of traveling and learning more. And I just was like fixated on that for so long. And I've always wanted to live in another country, and like I've always wanted to learn Spanish, and like
How much, before moving, how much international time abroad had you spent?
Let's see. I went on a trip to Mexico with my Girl Scout troop. There's like an international Girl Scout house there, so we met a bunch of other Girl Scouts from like all over the United States, and then we did like some programs in the community there. And then in college, I studied abroad for a summer in Spain.
Okay, so you had been there before.
Yeah, I had been there before. And I was like, I know I have to come back to Spain. Like, maybe not this place, but I have to come back to Spain. Like, I have to, you know, like, I did it. I loved it so much that I was like, I got to go. Like, I have to find a way to get back. And so it took me a couple years, but I was like, okay, there's this teaching program over there. Like, I'm just going to go. I was like, I'm single. I don't have any pets. I don't have any children. I don't have, you know, any really, you know, like I have my family and I have my student loans, but they'll both be there for me when I get back. So I was like, I'm going to go and do it. And I didn't know anybody over there. I was just like, I'm going for it.
Was moving there and being like, okay, I'm not leaving for, you know, quite a while. Was it different from what you thought it would be at all?
I think it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because like when I lived in Missouri, I was like, okay, it's not super easy to get home, but like I can get home. Like I wasn't able to go home for Thanksgiving, but I could go home for Christmas. And I went home for, I don't think I went home for spring break, but I went home for a couple of weeks in the summer, kind of between when school ended and summer school started. So I was able to go home and see my family. I was only 2 hours ahead, you know, time zone wise, not 9. So that was, you know, it was hard, but it was doable. But like when I moved to Spain, I was like, all right, I am, you know, my family, I can call them, I can Skype them, I can write them. But like, I'm here, like I am my own advocate. I have to deal with everything that happens to me. I have to be, you know, I have to be the one that speaks up for me. And that was really hard at first, especially like in another language, in another culture. Like, you know, even simple things as like trying to figure out how to go to the doctor was like, you know, and I have anxiety. So like that just, you know, made it even more difficult. But it was really hard at first, like just getting used to everything. I mean, like Europe, there are definitely things culturally that are different. So I didn't like, you know, notice like as big of a shock. I think initially it sort of kind of hit me in waves, if that makes sense. You know, like you're there and you're like, whoa, this is totally different, but like, okay, I can do this. And then, you know, you get an apartment and you're like, whoa, okay, like these are things that are different here, like living in an apartment and sharing roommates with Spanish people. And then, you know, you're like, whoa, I have a job and like this is how my job is different, you know. So it wasn't like culture shock and then it was done. It was just kind of like a lot of, it was definitely a process.
So, and you moved over there in, was that 2014 or 2015?
2014.
2014. So you've basically been, with the exception of the few times you've come back here to visit, you've been living over there for almost 3 years now, is that?
Yeah, that's been my 3rd year.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And now you do
wild.
have, you went over there and you have a master's degree in...
Bilingual education.
Bilingual education,
Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, I guess prior to moving there, did you minor in Spanish at Western? Did you, or was that just the language you did throughout high school and college?
Did. I took 3 years in high school, and then I was like, I'm never gonna do Spanish again. Like, I'm so sick of this. And then I got to college, and I was like, you know, like I kind of miss it. It's a really practical thing to know. So I was like, all right. So I minored in Spanish, and then I took about 2.5 years off without like speaking it. I was like, oh, whatever, I'll remember it. And then when I got to Spain, I was like, oh, I speak Spanish. I'll be fine. And it turns out that like a minor isn't always good enough to get you a base level of Spanish. And like, it just, you don't, I mean, when you minor in Spanish, or probably even when you major in Spanish, like you don't use it, like, you know, you don't learn a lot of the practical everyday things that you need to know. Like you can write an essay about this poem that you read, but like you can't really have an exchange with someone like trying to find directions. Mm-hmm. Spain Spanish is completely different than any of the other Spanishes that like I'd been exposed to prior to studying abroad there. I always try and explain to people like English is hard, but it's not complicated. Like English is hard because we have a lot of rules that have exceptions and I don't know. Spanish is not nearly as hard, but it's way more complicated. Like it's very formulaic, if that makes sense, but it's definitely more complex, and there are a lot more components that I think you need to know when you're speaking Spanish. And so that was hard for me a lot of the times. Like, I just get really easily flustered and really embarrassed, and then I would say like something that didn't make sense, or I would say the wrong thing. Or like one time I think I told a waiter, like I got some things mixed up in the order, because the order in, like the sentence structure is a little bit different. And so like one time I think I told the waiter that like I had already been ordered, instead of like telling the waiter that like someone had already taken my order. And it's really interesting. Like, for the most part, people are pretty patient and they're pretty forgiving. When they can see that you're trying, but definitely leads to some interesting experiences.
I'm still learning Spanish. It was funny, like when I moved here about a year ago. Wow, it's weird. I moved here like 2 years ago. I thought that I was going to be like amazing at Spanish really fast. I should have known better. I think it was my third day here. I was in a restaurant. Like, actually, it was just down the street, and I was like, all by myself. I was like, right, I'm going to do this. I'm conquering my fear of being by myself. I'm conquering my fear of being in another country. I'm conquering my fear of speaking Spanish. And the waiter came up to me, and he's like, what would you like? And I asked him for una ensalada con polla, because I thought that all of the endings needed to match. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, that's a dick salad. The waiter just kind of gave me a weird look, and I was like, oh, he must be really impressed that an American can speak Spanish.
Didn't you one time like ask for like a hot firefighter or something?
Yeah, I was looking for bombillo, which is light bulb, and I said bombero, which is firefighter, and they were like,
can you find me a firefighter?
yeah, it's like, where can I buy a firefighter for my room? And they were like, no, that's not what you want. You want like bombillo or something like that. Oh, I was so embarrassed. So just like, well, all right, that happened. Like,
yeah.
I would like a firefighter for my room, though.
Who wouldn't,
Yeah.
That's, anything goes wrong in the middle of the night, just get put out right away.
Got your firefighter.
That's it. So when you initially moved over there, were you worried that you wouldn't get to perform stand-up anymore?
Yes. And originally, like, I thought I was just going to be there for a year. I was going to teach. I was going to travel a lot. I was going to love it. And then I was going to go back home and, grow up and get a real job. And I was like, all right, like, I can kind of, like, I'd sort of kind of done stand-up a little bit, like, when I was in Missouri. Like, I think I only got on stage, like, 3 or 4 times, and I'd done somebody's podcast when I was over there. And so I was like, okay, like, I lived with that. It's probably not great, but I can do it. I'll be okay. And then around, like, I think it was December or January, I just remember, like, I posted in the Facebook group for, like, English teachers or, like, English speakers over in Madrid, and I was like, hey, does anyone know where I can do stand-up? Or, like, does anyone want to, like, start a stand-up show? I used to do stand-up, like, I promise I got some street cred. I'm legit, and like, I really want to do this. And so someone put me in touch with a guy who ran a monthly showcase, and he was like, yeah, sure, like, bring 7 minutes or something like that. And the show that I went to with them, like, just so happened to be like, I mean, there were probably like 100 people in this bar. Like, there were,
nice.
It was packed. I was so overwhelmed by the amount of people in there, and it was like hot and sweaty, and like, you couldn't really move, and it was amazing. And I was like, I need this in my life. Like, I have to do this. And part of why I started doing stand-up was that I just, like, I needed some sort of, like, emotional release and, like, some sort of coping mechanism to deal with everything that was just, like, life was handing to me. And I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. So I was like, well, I mean, I guess I'll kind of, like, make jokes about it, because I don't know what else to do. And like, as I've gotten older and kind of progressed a little bit more through stand-up, I kind of think, like, okay, this thing is, like, once I've made a joke about something on stage, I'm like, okay, I think I've experienced it, processed it, dealt with it, and then been like, okay, I can laugh about that. And, like, there are some things in my life that, like, I'm not ready to, like, personally, that I'm not ready to joke about in my life. And, like, I've tried, and I'm like, oh, this is really awkward for me. Like, I'm not, and it's not funny, and it's like, like, I gotta still, like, work on dealing with this issue before I can bring that on stage. And I don't even remember how I started talking about this. But yeah, just like in Madrid, it was so exhilarating, and I was like, I need to do this again. And the guys who ran the show were like, please come back next month, like, we really want you on this showcase. And then I think I did like every single, because they, they were like rotating, they would like rotate through comics, and so I think they had me on like every single show
Wow, nice.
until the end of the year that they did, which
Now,
was
were
like
you
really cool.
performing only in English? Have you had the chance to do Spanish stand-up as well? Or
I
is that
have
really rough?
not had the chance to do stand-up in
It's got
Spanish
to be
yet.
intimidating.
Yeah, and like I tell people, like I'm not funny in Spanish on purpose yet. Like I'm still like in English, I have such I think a distinct personality, but like I don't really have a personality in Spanish yet. Like I'm getting there. Like sometimes I say things and people laugh at them, and I'm like, yes, I wanted you to laugh at that, and not like, oh, I just asked for a firefighter for my room,
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm getting there, and like that is definitely a goal that I want to have. I want to work on like a set in Spanish, and it's difficult for a couple of reasons. One, because like, obviously it's a completely different language, but things that are funny in Spanish and to Spanish people are not always things that are funny in English or to English people, speaking people. And so part of it is definitely like writing a set, but a lot of it is like figuring out, okay, is this funny? Is this not funny? And so I'm kind of,
It's even though you have the actual language translation, the actual humor can be lost in translation.
yeah, exactly. Like one of my Spanish friends sent me this comedian, and he was like, this guy is like a legend. Like everybody in Spain knows who he is. Like I don't even remember his name, but he was like, everybody loves him. And I watched it and I was like, I understand what he's saying, but I don't get why everyone in the audience is like crying. They're laughing so hard. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, why is this funny? And he's like, oh, I didn't even think that like you wouldn't understand the cultural meanings behind a lot of this stuff. And I was like, I don't know. So I think that probably, I'm sure it goes both ways, like Spanish speakers not understanding why things are funny to English speakers.
When you perform in general, and I imagine that there is a small expat community over there that is, besides yourself, that are Americans doing stand-up, or is it mostly...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, it's super cool because there's a pretty good sized population of people doing like performing in English. So like there are a couple of different like improv groups, and then there's like a couple of different like people who run stand-up shows in English. So it's pretty cool. We have some people from the United States. My co-producer that I work with is from Canada. We have people from the UK. And then it's really cool too, because like a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but like some of the guys who do Comedy Central Spain will come and they'll like practice their stuff in English. Last year we had guests from, we had a comedian from Australia. We had a comedian from Belgium. We had a comedian from Italy. So we have comedians from all over, and it's so cool because like everyone brings such a unique perspective and their experience, and like things that are, I don't want to say like certain things are really funny to only certain groups, but like everyone's got like such different life experiences and just like things that they can laugh about. Like I was saying, my like learning Spanish jokes go over so well because everyone in that room has learned at least one other language, and so they get it. They understand the struggles of going through a different language, and like the good things and the bad things and everything in between that comes from that. So it's really cool that we like all share this experience, and like a lot of the people who perform in those shows and go to those shows are not natives to Spain, and so that's really cool that we can all share like that's like a space where we can all come and laugh, and maybe like laugh at things that Spanish people do that we don't understand, or like laugh at things that are frustrating about Madrid.
So what's the scene? I mean, just overall, how many times a week are you able to go up in Madrid roughly?
It depends. So I co-produce a show called Stand Up Yours in Madrid, and at first it was kind of funny because like my friend Jonathan got my friend Trisha and I together, and he was like, I want to do a show, I want you guys on board. And we were like, yeah, okay, sounds good. So at first we were just going to do like a monthly showcase, and then we found another bar that was interested, and we were like, okay, so we'll just do like 2 shows a month. And then all of a sudden we were doing like at least 1 show a week, sometimes 2. I think one time we had 3 shows in a week, and it was really hard for me because I was working full time and getting my master's degree. So I was like, I don't have time for this. And so I got really just like stressed out and kind of burned out towards the end of the school year. But usually I think you can get up like once, sometimes in a good week, twice. I mean, it helps because like I run the show, so like I can usually host it. So Trisha and I usually will like we'll take turns hosting, like either one half, one of us will do one half of the show, the other one will do the other, or like sometimes I'll do a show and then she'll do a show. So it's really nice to like have a lot of experience like running a room and doing all the production and like booking the show and doing the promotion and everything. But it's really cool to just kind of like show up and do a show. And then my friend Chris he does like really different kind of like a really different format. So he's done like Battle of the Sexes, or like Us versus Them, so like Spanish comedians versus like, comedians from other places around the world, or like, the United States versus, everyone else. So it's really interesting, like the way that he sets up his format. So like it's totally different from what we do.
Okay.
So, sometimes you can get up. It just really depends. But, like, it's not like living in Seattle or New York where you can get up, like, a bunch of times a night.
Right.
But, for, like, a Spanish-speaking country, it's not bad.
It's got to be... You must be doing far more than you expected to be doing over there for stand-up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never in a million years, if you had told me, like, oh, yeah, your second year in Spain, like, you're going to run a show, I probably just would have laughed at you. Like, oh, I'm not going to ever do that. But I do, and it's wild. It's been a great experience.
Another time I like somehow managed to get this guy's phone number. I don't know how, but anyway, we're exchanging like sexual WhatsApp messages, and he goes, "What are you wearing right now?" And I was like, "Something see-through." And he goes, "Really? You should send me a pic." So I sent him a photo of my retainer. He did not respond to my message, which is really too bad because my teeth are really straight, you guys.
Obviously, being a female performer in a male-dominated art form is, so often fraught with issues. Among them, of course, sexual harassment. Then there's obviously the misogynistic dismissal that women just, they just aren't funny, and which is bullshit. But have you encountered these kinds of things personally, and how do you deal with them?
All the time. I think sometimes people say things and they're well-meaning or they're well-intentioned, but they're just like totally just not appreciated. Like I was on a date one time and this guy was like, "Oh, you're really funny for a girl." And I was like, okay, this is our last date. This is our first date, but this is definitely our last date. It gets so, I think people are like trying to say like, they're trying to give a compliment, but like putting that qualifier, like, for a girl or for a lady, it's like, that just, I don't want to say it hurts. It's just like, really, it's 2017. Like, do we still have to say, do we still have to put that qualifier on there? Like, oh, you're really funny for like a female comic or something like that. No, I'm really funny for a comic, or like I'm a really good writer for someone who's a writer, not
right.
like a lady writer. That sounds dumb, but that's exactly my point.
You would never say I'm a lady writer to
yeah.
somebody.
I know. I should just start introducing myself as.
Here's my card.
That.
It says Claire Jones, lady writer.
Yeah. So it just, you get it a lot. And I think I experienced it a lot here in Bellingham at first. And I think part of it was that people were like, the guys here were so used to just like doing a show with dudes that like they just weren't really sure, like, oh, there's Claire, like, help, what do we do? How do we introduce her? So they would start saying like the lovely, the beautiful, just like, I mean, they're nice things, but like when they're introducing their friends as like the very funny, the very talented, the excellent writer, right. And then it's like, oh, here's lovely Claire Jones, the lady writer, It's
you're not gonna introduce another male comic and be like, this guy is hung. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it sounds. I saw this thing on Twitter the other day that was like, if women wrote about the opposite sex, like men write about the opposite sex, and it was just like. It just like reading it was so ridiculous, and I was like, I wish people could understand like how they sound when they're saying that, like I always wanted to like host Bellingham and be like, oh, like our next comic is a very handsome man, like he looks great with his new glasses, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Benoit, like not say anything about like
well, I would be flattered, but
but like you get what I mean, like it just but I think that intros are so important, and like if you were a host, like I think the most important thing, I mean obviously keep the show going, but like the most important thing is to give the comics a good intro, because like if you don't set them up right, they're competing not only with like their expectations of what they should be doing and their new material, but they're also competing with like the audience expecting
Of
them to be the beautiful and the lovely, you know. And
That's-
it's like I always felt like I needed to go on and say something like really crass or like, you know, immediately I had to have people like laughing the first thing out of my mouth, and I was like, this is so much harder
Yeah.
than I think it is for guys who are just getting introduced as like the very funny or, you know, what have you, because they don't really have to compete with that.
Right.
Another thing that I encountered here in Bellingham was like I would get introduced as Mr. Claire Jones all the time, and that
Yeah.
made me so mad because I was like,
It's,
I don't know.
I think it's, well, sorry to interrupt.
I
but-
was like, there is one woman on this show. Like you can, you know, one time not say Mr. or like maybe you shouldn't say Mr. at all if
Yeah.
you're gonna be sloppy and not paying attention. But I was like, get my name right. It's not hard. You have one woman's name to
Yeah, this
do.
is
Like you
not-
can do it.
So as far as, I mean, like, sexual harassment, do you ever feel like do you feel like you, if you do well, do you get hit on a lot doing comedy, or?
It's interesting, and like this, I don't know, kind of goes back to like things that I'm like not quite secure enough and like ready to make jokes about. But like
Right.
I don't know, I made a joke one time to my friend and she was just like so offended by what I had said. I was like, I feel like I'm such a good friend to have because like I'm funny, but I'm fat, and I'm, you know, like my friends are like, they're like 8s, 9s, 10s, you know, and like I am just not like that. Like my friends are gorgeous, smart, intelligent, wonderful human beings, and so like I am usually surrounded by, I feel like, better looking, thinner people. And so like a lot of times like this, I mean, I pointed it out to my friend and, you know, she was just like, I had no idea that happens. But like it was, you know, for a while, like now that I host my own show and I'm there like all the time, it doesn't happen so much. But like when I would only do a show a month, like I would go and talk to my friends at the end of the show and we'd be laughing and stuff, and like a dude would come up, be like, oh, you're really funny, and then like immediately start talking to my friends. And so I was trying to like spin the joke like, oh, I'm the best kind of wing woman to have, like come to my show because, you know, like guys will come up, tell me I'm really funny, and then they'll start talking to you, you know. It's like, this is
Yeah.
so good for you. And my friend was just like so offended by that, and she was like, well, you're not, you know, you're not ugly. And I was like, I never said I was. You know, like I
Yeah.
just said, you know, like there are just different things about my appearance. And it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people have this, I mean, maybe other women do, I obviously can't speak to everyone, but like I feel like I've been kind of lucky in that regard, and that people aren't like, you know, just like shamelessly hitting on me or like asking for my number or anything, or like, you know, stalking me on social media. Like I've been pretty lucky in that I haven't had to deal with that, but I've definitely heard of women having to do that, and just I don't know, like getting this weird like fanboy following or something. Like luckily I don't have to deal with that.
Right.
So
I mean, I guess
don't
that's
know.
yeah. I mean, I say, you know, it's a weird question to ask you, I guess, but I mean, is that one thing where you're like, I'm glad I don't have supermodel looks, because maybe you'd have to deal with so much more
Yeah,
crap that.
I don't know. I mean, like I mean, maybe it is. Like I don't know. It's like it's so interesting because like women in comedy have, I feel like, a lot of very similar shared experiences, but a lot of women have like very different experiences. So I don't want to speak to that, but like personally, I mean, yeah, maybe it's good that I don't, or like I give off this persona on stage where I'm like really clumsy and awkward, because like that's true. And so maybe people aren't like, oh, I gotta go tap that or whatever, you know, like so I don't know. It's really interesting. I mean, I've definitely dealt with like sexual harassment and getting heckled on stage, or just like people saying things about me, or just like feeling like I was taking up space in like such a male dominated area. Like, I mean, you know, at the upfront where you're in the green room and it's like a bunch of dudes, and then me, I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, wait, you belong here. Or like that NBC showcase where, you know, there was like me and one other woman and like a bunch of dudes. Again, I was like, what am I doing here? And then I'm like, no, you belong here. Like you were, you know, you're obviously, they saw something in you, like that's why they asked you to be here. So it's like, you know, you're valid and worthy of being in this space. But it's really hard sometimes because it's such a male dominated scene.
Right.
One of my friends was like, hey, you should start doing an online dating profile. And I was like, yeah, okay. So here are a few things that are great about dating me. I am really open-minded, tolerant of gluten and lactose. Another thing that's great about me is that I am okay with sleeping around. And by that I mean I could fall asleep anywhere.
There's some things that you don't feel comfortable talking about on stage. So where do you personally draw the line as a performer as far as what you're going to reveal to an audience versus what you just don't feel you can make jokes about?
For me, I'm like pretty open about a lot of things on stage, and like I will talk about things that maybe, you know, not everyone feels comfortable about talking about, or, you know, like I talk about how sweaty I am in Spain all the time because I'm convinced Spanish people don't sweat. Like I'm pretty sure they just are physically incapable of it. I don't think I've ever seen a sweaty Spanish person. It's amazing. But you know, like I'll talk about maybe the not so glamorous things about like being a human being, like, oh, when I get anxious I have to poop a lot, and it's like, sorry guys, if I drop the mic and run off the stage, it's because I'm real nervous, you know. Like I'm pretty open about that stuff. And I think, you know, I've talked about like dealing with depression and anxiety on stage, and I think that that's really important because a lot of people can relate to it. And, you know, obviously with things like that, I mean, with everything you have to, you know, you walk a fine line between like, you know, complaining or being like, hi, I need therapy kind of things.
Right.
You know, but, and like making a funny joke. But I think it's important to, you know, talk about things like that. But, I don't know, like there are a few things in my life where I'm just like, I am not ready to deal with that. And it's just like, you know, like my, you know, kind of like I mentioned a little bit briefly earlier, like I've struggled with like body image issues my whole entire life. And I tried to make jokes about that a couple months ago. And I was like, wow, this is really hard for me. And this kind of is like bordering on the hi, I need therapy sort of like comedy. So I was like, maybe I need to like work on this set. And like every time I'm like, oh, I should write those jokes, I just don't. So that kind of makes me think like, okay, maybe I need to work through some things before I'm like ready to make jokes about them, because that's just too personal to share with people on stage. But you know, I'm getting there, and like maybe someday I'll be ready to. I just, you know, like am not ready to do that now.
So if you couldn't do stand-up anymore, how would that affect you?
Oh, my life would be terrible. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what I would do. Like I guess I'd go back to posting garbage on Facebook and hoping that people would laugh at it, or like I don't know, stand-up is such an important part of my life because like I get to see my friends and I get to meet new people, and I like personally get to grow as a writer and as a performer and like as a, you know, as a host, as a person, really. Like, you know, stand-up isn't just like, for me, it isn't just like getting up and like making people laugh. It's so many different things. And like, I don't know, like stand-up has really helped me deal with my anxiety. And like, I know I'm a teacher and everyone's like, but how come you're afraid to talk in front of people? Like you do it all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but like I'm still nervous about it sometimes, or like I'm still afraid when I get up there and like, you know, my hand.
That's interesting. That just made me think like, you know, and I was talking to Brett about this because he's kind of trying to become a teacher, you know, he's doing stuff. And so and he was talking about how like he thinks the idea of just becoming a teacher will make him such a better comedian and vice versa because of the shared in front of an audience things, even though one's to make people laugh, one's to help people learn. Do you feel there's overlap there, or do you feel like you're still nervous getting up in front of students to teach?
I think I'm always going to get nervous getting up in front of people. Like I know this year, like for my master's program, I had to give presentations both, you know, by myself and in groups. And like that always made me really nervous. And I was like, I'm literally giving the same presentation that the other 20 people in this class are also giving. Like, you know, why am I so nervous? Or like, I'm literally getting up in front of this group of 8 people that I've been getting up in front of this whole year. Like, why am I anxious about this? Or like, you know, oh, it's the same, you know, 30 people that come, 30 people, that's so generous, Claire. You know, it's the same 15 people that come to your show every week. Like, why are you nervous? But it just, I don't know. Like, it depends on the day. I think it depends on how much I've slept. I had to stop drinking coffee for a while because it just made my nerves so bad. But yeah, I think there's definitely like some overlap. Like, you know, I remember when I started teaching high school, I was like, wow, I have built-in hecklers all the time. You know, so it kind of like gets you a little bit ready to kind of maybe, I don't know. Usually I feel like when people go to a comedy show, like they're an attentive audience, but like that doesn't always happen. And like, you know, sometimes at the Frog, like you get people talking in the back. And so it kind of like, for me, it kind of helped me like learn how to not let like a side conversation distract me from teaching, or like somebody flipping, you know, like some 8-year-old flipping their water bottle in the back of the classroom. Like, you know, that really helped me just, you know, like, okay, tune it out. Like that's one person doing one thing. Everyone else is like mostly paying attention to you. So like keep doing that. So I think that there definitely is some overlap. Like, you know, obviously the classroom is not a stage and the stage is not a classroom, but I think there are definitely like, I think becoming better and coming more into my own as a comedian has helped me become a better educator, and I think vice versa, becoming a better educator has helped me like become a better comedian.
So obviously be very kind of emotionally devastating if you just couldn't do stand-up anymore,
Yeah.
I suppose. But so what are your goals with it at this point?
Oh, I don't know. Everyone's like, where do you see your, you know, like, do you want to be on Comedy Central? And like, I don't think I do, just because stand-up is such an important outlet in my life that I don't want to make it my life. You know, like it's a hobby, it's a coping mechanism, it's a way to see my friends and to perform and to like work on that personal growth as like a performer and a writer and, you know, as an audience member too, I think. But I don't want to make that my entire life. Like if I got burned out or I just like stopped enjoying comedy and like it wasn't fun for me to write, it was work, and it wasn't fun for me to do shows anymore, it was work, I don't know what I would do, because like comedy's always that thing that I turn to. I'm like, oh, I'm really stressed out in school right now, but hey, I've got this comedy show coming up this weekend, or like, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now that's really overwhelmed, like let's get together and laugh for an hour and a half and like maybe forget that the world is burning and underwater, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd really like to be a tour guide. I think that would be the coolest job. And I was like, all right, what can I be a tour guide of? And I was like, I know. I will be a tour guide of all of the places that I got drunk and threw up in downtown Seattle. It's gonna be a long tour, so get your walking shoes on, folks. The price of the tour will be the special price of a drink. So you can buy the drink, I will drink the drink, and then we will create special memories that only you are going to remember.
We have now reached the bonus round of questions.
Okay.
These are always on the podcast, never on the radio edit. I ask this question to every single person because it's just, I don't know. I just find it interesting. It's a good chance to learn something I don't know about someone.
I'm pretty open.
What's the closest you've ever come to dying? That's the first one.
I feel like I have two stories for this. One time I was in a pool in Florida, and like I've never enjoyed deep water. Like I'm so terrified of drowning. I don't think I even finished swimming lessons. Like I don't really know how to swim. Like people are like, do you know how to swim? And I'm like, I can float kind of, sort of, but like it terrifies me. For someone who loves living by the water, it's weird and I don't get it either. But one time I was in the pool and like I was trying to cross like the 5-foot area. This was like before I got, you know, I've always been tall for my age, but I was, you know, I'm 26 now. I guess it's a weird thing to say, but I was like trying to cross the pool and I was like hopping on my toes, and I just remember like I hopped, I guess, like too high, because then I came down and there was just like water in my nose and in my mouth, and I was coughing and spluttering, and like that kept happening. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of this pool. Like it was probably just like a few seconds, but I just remember being like, oh my God, I'm gonna die here, like in this pool. And then the other one, I'm surprised I didn't find a way to work this into the podcast, because it's like so important for, I think, what I'm doing now. So like, I don't know if you've seen like my stand-up yours page, but it's like got all these broken umbrellas. Like that's like our thing, is the broken umbrellas. I was on a trip in Portugal over spring break, my first year. And I'd been like really just like dealing with a lot of anxiety that I had never really, I think I've always had anxiety and just like never really, or like, you know, I think my therapist called it like a stress disorder. Like I don't really know how to handle stress. And so
just
like
builds up and builds up and builds up.
Yeah. And then I'm just like paralyzed. I can't do anything. I can't act. I can't, you know, like I know I need to make a list, but I'm like, I'm going to just lay here in bed and hope that it passes, and then it doesn't pass. And I'm like, oh no, now what? You know, it's like that. I have, I'm getting better at like recognizing it and being like, oh, maybe I should do something about this. But like, it just, I don't know, like I think I've always like had a hard time dealing with stress. And I was on this trip in Portugal, and I was having, like, the first half of the trip was really good, and then for just a variety of reasons, the second half of the trip was just, it was terrible, and, like, it rained the whole time, and I just remember I was, like, in my hostel bed, like, the whole time. I just, like, didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was having such a hard time, like, being like, oh, okay, like, you need to drink water now, or, like, oh, you need to get up and, like, you know, go get something to eat, or like you need to go outside and enjoy your trip because you're here. And so I just remember being like, I remember like walking across this bridge and being like, what if I jumped? And then I was like, no, I couldn't. My mom would be really sad. And I just remember I was there for so long. It was like I couldn't move my feet. I was just like there, and I was like, what if I did this? Like, would that make things better? Would it just like stop how much like I'm hurting and struggling and like how difficult this is? And then I was like, no, you can't do that, like you know. And I think that was when I really realized like, oh, I need to go see a therapist like tomorrow probably, or you know, like yesterday. But right. I just remember like being on that bridge, and I was like, I just want to die more than I've ever wanted to die in my life. And I just was like, okay, like, you know, you came all the way out here, you spent this money, like, do something with your trip. And like I said, it was like sheets of rain, and it was windy, and there were just like these broken umbrellas everywhere. And I feel like as someone from the Pacific Northwest, like you probably feel this too, like this reaction towards like umbrellas, and you're like, oh, that one's broken, good, umbrellas suck, you know. And I just, it's so hard to explain that to people who are not like from Washington or Oregon, right, because they don't get it. But I was like, I know I'm going to give a fake tour of this city based on the broken umbrellas that I see, because that's how I feel right now. And then I went home and I like put motivational quotes as the captions, because I'm like, I'm so crazy. Like I feel so crazy right now, but like I have to do something to like get me through the rest of this trip so that I can go home, so that I can like call this psychiatrist. Like I need to do this, but like I have to get home. And so I like called a couple of my friends, or I like messaged them. I was like, hey, I'm having a hard time, like will you check on me, you know, like periodically throughout the next couple of days. I was like, I can't talk about it right now, like I'm, you know, like physically I'm safe, but like mentally I'm really having a hard time, can you check on me? And they were like, yeah, of course. And you know, then I like got home and like, you know, went to see a psychiatrist and like dealt with everything. But that, I don't know, like the broken umbrellas just like kind of stuck. And then when Trisha and I were trying to, because Jonathan used to do all of our posters, and he's a cartoonist, and so like the posters were just amazing, and they were so good, and he's a Photoshop whiz. And then he moved back to the States, and we were like, what are we going to do? Because we just relied on him to do the posters. And I was like, I don't know how to use Photoshop. She didn't know how to use Photoshop. And she was like, well, Jonathan would always use like random photos that he took. And I was like, I know, I have this whole collection of broken umbrella photos, like we should use those. And for some reason she was like weirdly on board with it. She's like, all right, let's do it. So like that's our thing, it's just like broken umbrellas. And like every time it rains in Madrid, I get so happy, because I'm like, there are gonna be broken umbrellas for days in the garbage can. And I don't know, it's kind of like become this thing. But it was like, that was what I needed to do to get myself through that time in my life.
How long did you were on that bridge? How long were you hanging out there?
I don't know. It was probably at least half an hour. Like, I'm not good at judging time, but it felt like forever. And I was just like, my feet just like, I couldn't move them off the bridge. I was just like hanging out on like the sidewalk part, and like people were walking by and they were driving by, and I was like, I need to go, but I can't make my feet move. Like, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're still here.
And me too.
I think everybody, a lot of people, you know, have at some point. Even people who are not severely depressed usually have some sort of suicidal thought at some point. Mm-hmm. Or when you are depressed, even if you're not, let's say, cripplingly depressed, or mm-hmm. it's really a major, you know, at a depressed moment in your life. But, you know, like with my anxiety disorder, if I had not gotten to see a psychiatrist and gotten on the right meds when I needed them, I probably just would have shot myself, you know. It's like I was staying at my dad's, and I knew where his guns were, and I just like, you know, I couldn't like eat or sleep properly anymore. And it was just like the best part of my day was when I was unconscious, was when I was sleeping.
But then like it got to the point where like I couldn't even sleep. Like I was so miserable, I couldn't even sleep. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, you know, I can't function anymore. And it's like, something is wrong when like you can't eat. Like I love eating. I love cooking. I love eating. I love being social. And I was like, I don't want to see people. I don't want to eat. I don't want to like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's scary for me, like, because, like, I was, like, my anxiety was so high that, like, I was, like, hungry and I was wanting to eat, and I was trying to eat, and, like, my body was, like, involuntarily causing me to throw up, so it was, like, yeah, and then you just start freaking out, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to starve to death, this is how I'm going to,
Yeah, like, I've definitely had moments of that where, like, there was, like, a period of my life, I think it was, like, summer before 8th grade, I was doing this, like, theater camp, and I had this weird, like, fling with a guy, and, like, I was so just, like, anxious about it, like, I would just, like, throw up all the time, and then, like, I had to give a presentation in school, and I would, like, throw up, and, my parents are like, what's wrong with you? Do you have the flu? Are you fine? Because, like, I'd never been like that before, but, like, that year was, like, really hard for me, dealing with a lot of, like, stress, and I think... I don't know, like my psychiatrist was like, I don't think you really have anxiety. I think you get anxious, but like that's related to your, like having a stress disorder. And at first I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. And then I thought about it and I was like, it's totally true. Like I just don't know how to handle stress. I'm such a procrastinator. I'm like, I'll do it later. And I think part of the reason why I procrastinate is because I'm like anxious about doing something and it's like overwhelming to me. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that right now because it makes me anxious or it's going to, like be hard or tedious or stressful. It's like, I'm just not going to do it. And then all of a sudden, you've got this huge list of things that have like very important deadlines and you're like, I should have done that like, when it came up. And so it's not easy dealing with that kind of stuff. But
so the last question here is, and I love this because it can be either rational or irrational, but what do you fear most in life?
I don't know, like I think definitely drowning because like I said, I'm not like a strong swimmer, just like not being able to breathe like that. I think that goes back to like being a person who's just like stressed out a lot and like anxious a lot. Is like sometimes I have a hard time breathing or like, I feel like no matter how deeply I breathe, like I can't get any air and it's like, I'm gonna, I think like not being able to breathe is something that like really just makes me anxious. But probably the thing that I fear most, this is so dumb, but like driving a car freaks me. Can I say this word? It freaks me the fuck out. Like I can't handle it. I got in an accident when I was 19 and my dad handled it so poorly and like I hated driving at that point, but I was like, nope, I'm done. Really? Like I never want to drive a car again. And I've done a pretty good job of not driven a car in like
so it just
over a year. I have not driven a car in over a year.
Even just being in the car driving now, even years after that happened, the fear is that you're going to get in an accident again?
Being in the driver's seat, I can't even handle, like my heartbeat is, or like my heart rate is up right now just thinking about it. Being in a car is fine. Driving a car, I can't do it. Like I haven't.
As long as someone else is in control and it's not you, right?
Exactly, because I have such a hard time like focusing on like, okay, what is the car doing? What is the car behind you doing? What is the car in front of you doing? What are the cars beside you doing? And like whatever's happening in the car and like directions. Like I'm so directionally challenged. I get lost all the time, everywhere. Like doesn't matter, like I could get lost in Bellingham today probably. Like I could get lost in Madrid. It's like I have no sense of direction. So that for me is really hard. And it's like dealing with directions and like controlling the car and like what all the other cars are doing. Like it's too much. I just really cannot handle that. So like I was gonna like try and like learn how to drive again this summer and then I broke my foot and that was like, I don't really need to be in the car right now.
Get that boot up there under the
I mean my mom has a manual, so it would have been fine probably, but or I mean not a manual, an automatic. She's an automatic. But I don't know, like probably driving a car.
Okay.
It's such a dumb thing to say, but
that's interesting. I see. That's why I love asking that question because I never know what the response is going to be. So
yeah, it's probably always different.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're just about done here. So that's been a lot of fun. My thanks to Claire Jones for being on the program. If you'd like to contact us, you can message us or comment on the Are You Serious Facebook page. We will be back in short order with another installment, but until then, I'm Matt Benoit for Are You Serious? Be sure to keep it right here for more great local programming on KMRE 102.3 FM, Bellingham.
When the lights get low, cup seems half empty. but it's almost